I didn't come here to be loved. I came here to survive. Clara Whitmore's hands trembled as the stagecoach rattled toward her future, a future she'd bought with desperation and a single letter. She was 23, orphaned, and alone in a world that had no place for women like her. The man waiting at the end of this dusty Colorado road had paid for her passage, and she knew what that meant. She would cook his meals, scrub his floors, and ask for nothing. Love was a luxury for women with choices. Clara had none. But Ethan Cole was about to change everything she thought she knew about survival. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Now, let's begin. The summer heat pressed down on Clara Whitmore like a physical weight as she stepped off the stagecoach onto the parched earth of Ridgway, Colorado. Dust billowed around her worn boots, and she had to steady herself against the coach's weathered side. 3 weeks of traveling had left her exhausted, her dark traveling dress stained with the evidence of countless miles, her face pale beneath the brim of her simple bonnet. She stood alone on the edge of town, clutching a small carpet bag that contained everything she owned in this world: 2 dresses, a few undergarments, her mother's hairbrush, and a worn copy of Shakespeare's sonnets. The town spread before her in shades of brown and gray, rough-hewn buildings, dirt streets, and weathered faces that turned to study the newcomer with open curiosity. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times during the long journey west, but now that it was here, her carefully constructed composure threatened to crumble. She was a mail-order bride. The words still tasted bitter in her mouth, still made her stomach clench with shame and fear, but shame was a luxury she could no longer afford. The letter had been brief, businesslike. Seeking wife for ranch work, room and board provided. Write if interested. Ethan Cole, Ridgway, Colorado. No promises of affection, no flowery declarations, just the stark truth of a transaction. A man needed help running his ranch. Clara needed a place to survive. It was as simple and as complicated as that. Miss Whitmore? The voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Clara turned to find a tall man standing a few feet away, hat in hand. He was older than she'd expected, perhaps 35 to her 23, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair touched with premature gray at the temples. His eyes were a startling shade of blue, clear and direct, studying her with the same careful attention she imagined he might give a horse he was considering purchasing. "Yes," Clara managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Mr. Cole." "Ethan," he corrected gently. He didn't move closer, didn't reach for her bag or attempt to take her arm. Instead, he simply stood there, solid and still, as if giving her time to adjust to his presence. "Welcome to Ridgway. The wagon's just over there. The ranch is about an hour's ride." Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak more. She followed him to a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 patient horses. Ethan placed her bag in the back with a care that surprised her, then offered his hand to help her up to the seat. His palm was calloused, his grip firm but not crushing. Clara settled onto the wooden bench, arranging her skirts, acutely aware of the man climbing up beside her. They rode in silence through the town. Clara watched the buildings give way to open country, rolling hills dotted with sage and scrub pine, mountains rising purple in the distance. The landscape was nothing like the green softness of Pennsylvania, where she'd grown up. This land was hard, unforgiving, beautiful in a stark way that made her throat tighten. "It's different from back east," Ethan said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Takes some getting used to." "It's fine," Claire replied automatically. She'd learned young to accept whatever circumstances presented themselves without complaint. After her parents died in the winter of '76, she'd moved between relatives who saw her as an obligation, a burden to be shuffled from house to house. The final straw had come 3 months ago, when her Uncle Gerald had made it clear that her continued residence in his home would require consideration she wasn't willing to provide. She'd fled with nothing but her dignity and the clothes on her back. The advertisement in the Boston Herald had seemed like divine intervention, a chance to escape, to start over, to find some measure of safety, even if it came at the cost of marrying a stranger. She'd written immediately, carefully crafting a letter that emphasized her abilities as a cook and housekeeper, her willingness to work hard, her understanding of what this arrangement truly meant. Ethan's response had been equally practical. He'd sent money for the journey and a brief note. Marry me when you arrive. Ranch needs a woman's hand. I need a wife. Come if you're willing. Clara had been willing. Desperation made one willing to accept almost anything. I want to be clear about expectations, Clara said now, forcing herself to break the silence. Better to establish the terms early, to understand exactly what would be required of her. I'm a hard worker, Mr. Cole. I can cook, clean, sew, tend a garden. I won't complain about the hours or the labor. I understand this is a business arrangement, and Stop. The single word, spoken quietly but firmly, cut through her rehearsed speech. Ethan pulled the wagon to a halt, the horses shifting in their traces. Clara's breath caught. Had she said something wrong already? Was he having second thoughts? Ethan turned to face her fully for the first time, those blue eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she held his gaze, lifting her chin slightly. She'd learned that showing fear only invited cruelty. Clara, he said, and hearing her given name in his low, steady voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. I think we need to get something straight right from the start. I didn't send for a servant. I sent for a wife. Clara blinked, confused. I understand that. I'm prepared to fulfill my duties as— No, Ethan interrupted again, but gently. He shifted on the bench, turning more fully toward her. I don't think you do understand. I'm not looking for someone to cook my meals and wash my clothes, and— He paused, a faint color rising in his weathered cheeks, and submit to me in bed because she thinks that's what's expected. I've got enough money to hire help if that's all I needed. Then what? Clara's voice trailed off. She genuinely didn't understand. What else would a man want from a mail-order bride? A partner, Ethan said simply. Someone to build a life with. This ranch, it's good land, but it's lonely. I've been working it alone for 5 years now, and I'm tired of coming home to an empty house. Tired of eating meals in silence. Tired of— He looked away toward the mountains. Tired of just existing instead of living. I want a wife, Clara. A real wife. Someone to share the work and the decisions and the future with. Not someone who's going to treat herself like hired help. Clara stared at him, her mind struggling to process his words. In her experience, men didn't want partners. They wanted servants who warmed their beds. They wanted submission, obedience, silent acceptance of whatever they chose to do. The idea that this stranger might want something different, something more, seemed almost dangerous to believe. I don't understand, she whispered. Ethan's expression softened. I know. And that tells me more about what you've been through than any letter could. He picked up the reins again, but didn't urge the horses forward. I'm going to be plain with you, Clara, because I think you deserve honesty. I want a wife I can talk to at the end of the day. Someone who'll tell me if she thinks I'm making a mistake with the ranch or if she has an idea for making things better. Someone who'll sit with me in the evenings and maybe tell me about a book she's reading or what she's thinking about. I want someone to build something with, not someone who's just going to survive in my house. But Clara's voice cracked slightly. I'm nothing. I have nothing to offer you except work. I can't bring you land or money or connections. I'm just an orphan with nowhere else to go. You're a woman who had the courage to travel halfway across the country to marry a stranger, Ethan countered. You're someone who's survived things that would break weaker people. And from your letters, you're someone who thinks and reads and has opinions about things. That's not nothing, Clara. That's exactly what I'm looking for. He clicked to the horses, and the wagon began moving again. Clara sat in stunned silence, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wanted to believe him. Some part of her, the part that used to dream before life taught her the futility of dreams, desperately wanted to believe that this could be real. But trust was dangerous. Trust led to disappointment, to pain, to situations she'd barely escaped from. I know you don't believe me yet, Ethan said after a long moment. And I don't blame you for that. But I'm asking you to give this a chance. Give me a chance to show you I mean what I say. If after a few months you decide you can't stay, I'll help you get set up somewhere else, give you enough money to start fresh. But I hope— He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I hope you'll stay. I hope we can make this work. The ranch came into view as they crested a rise, a sturdy two-story house built of logs and stone, a large barn, several outbuildings, and corrals spread across a valley that ran green with a stream cutting through it. It was more substantial than Clara had expected, more like a real home than the rough shack she'd braced herself to endure. "It's not fancy," Ethan said almost apologetically, "but it's solid. The roof doesn't leak, the stove works well, and there's a good root cellar. I've added onto it over the years as I could afford to." Clara couldn't speak. The house looked like something from a dream, something she'd given up hoping for years ago. Not because it was grand, it wasn't, but because it looked like a home. A real home where people might actually live instead of just exist. Ethan helped her down from the wagon, and Clara was grateful for his steadying hand because her legs felt weak beneath her. She followed him to the front door, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must hear it. The interior was neat but sparse. A large main room with a stone fireplace, a sturdy table and chairs, a well-worn sofa. Clara could see a kitchen area through a doorway and stairs leading up to what must be the bedrooms. Everything was clean but had the impersonal quality of a space inhabited by someone who didn't quite know how to make it a home. "I'll show you your room," Ethan said, picking up her bag and heading for the stairs. Clara followed, confused. Her room? Weren't they supposed to be married? Didn't he expect... Ethan opened a door to reveal a small but charming bedroom with a window overlooking the valley. A simple bed with a patchwork quilt, a dresser, a washstand with a pitcher and basin. It was modest but clean, and the afternoon sun streaming through the window made it warm and welcoming. "I thought you might want your own space," Ethan said, setting her bag on the bed. "At least until you feel comfortable. I'm in the room at the end of the hall. The door has a lock if that makes you feel better." Clara turned to stare at him, this strange man who kept saying things that made no sense. "But we're supposed to be married. Don't you want—" "Of course I do," Ethan said bluntly, then cleared his throat. "I'm not going to lie and pretend I'm not attracted to you, Clara. But I meant what I said about wanting a partner. When we share a bed, I want it to be because you want to, not because you think you have to. I want a wife who comes to me willingly, not one who's just gritting her teeth and getting through it." He moved toward the door, then paused. "We'll go into town tomorrow for the wedding. It'll be quick, just the preacher and maybe a witness or two. Nothing fancy. But tonight you rest. Settle in. There's water in the kitchen if you want to wash up, and I'll make us some supper in a bit." "You'll make supper?" Clara echoed, bewildered. Ethan's mouth quirked in a slight smile. "I've been feeding myself for 5 years. I'm not going to let you cook your first night here. You must be exhausted from the journey. Take some time, look around. I'll call you when it's ready." He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Clara stood frozen in the middle of the room, her mind reeling. This couldn't be real. Men didn't act like this. Men didn't offer separate rooms and talk about partnerships and wait for willing participation. Men took what they wanted and expected gratitude for providing the basics of survival. But Ethan Cole didn't seem to fit any of the patterns she'd learned. And that terrified her more than simple cruelty would have, because she didn't know how to navigate this. She didn't know what he really wanted, what the catch was, what would happen when he stopped playing this game of kindness and revealed his true expectations. Clara moved to the window, looking out over the ranch. The sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. It was beautiful, she realized with a small shock. This place was actually beautiful. Downstairs, she could hear Ethan moving around the kitchen, the clatter of pots and the sound of wood being added to the stove, the normal domestic sounds of a man preparing a meal. Clara pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window and allowed herself, just for a moment, to imagine that this might actually be what he claimed, a chance at something better, a chance at a real life instead of just survival. Then she straightened, smoothing her rumpled dress. Hope was dangerous, trust was foolish. She would go down to dinner, be polite and grateful, and watch carefully for the moment when the mask slipped and the real Ethan Cole revealed himself. Everyone showed their true nature eventually. She just needed to be ready when he did. Clara unpinned her bonnet and set it on the dresser, catching a glimpse of herself in the small mirror. She looked tired, dusty, and frightened despite her attempts at composure. She poured water from the pitcher into the basin and washed her face and hands, grateful for the cool relief. Then she took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and went downstairs. Ethan was at the stove stirring something that smelled surprisingly good. He glanced up when she entered. "I hope you like stew. It's about the only thing I can make that's edible." "I'm sure it's fine," Clara said carefully. "Is there anything I can help with?" "You can set the table if you want. Plates are in that cupboard, silverware in the drawer." Clara moved to comply, glad to have something to do with her hands. They worked in oddly comfortable silence for a few minutes, Ethan dishing up the stew while Clara laid out plates and utensils. It felt strange, this quiet domesticity, like playing house with a stranger. They sat across from each other at the large table, and Clara took a tentative bite of the stew. It was actually good. Simple, but well seasoned, the meat tender, and the vegetables perfectly cooked. "This is very good," she said honestly. Ethan looked pleased. "I had to learn after my father died and left me the ranch. Couldn't afford to hire anyone, so it was learn to cook or starve." "When did he pass?" Clara asked, then worried she'd been too forward. But Ethan didn't seem to mind. 5 years ago. Left me the ranch and a pile of debt. I've been working to pay it off and build the place up ever since. Finally got to a point where I could think about having a life instead of just working all the time. And that's when you decided to send for a wife." "That's when I decided I wanted to share what I'm building with someone," Ethan corrected gently. "There's a difference." Clara studied him across the table. In the lamplight, his face looked kind but tired, weathered by years of hard work but still strong. She found herself wanting to believe him, and that wanting scared her more than anything else. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "You must have received other letters, women with more to offer." Ethan set down his spoon, giving the question serious consideration. "I got about a dozen responses to my advertisement. Most of them were from women who were very practical about the arrangement. They knew what I wanted, they knew what they were getting, everything very businesslike. But your letter—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your letter was honest. You didn't try to sell yourself or make promises you might not keep. You were direct about your circumstances and what you could offer. But there were also these little glimpses of who you really are. You mentioned loving to read. You talked about missing the seasons back east, but being ready to learn to love new ones. You wrote that you believed in hard work and fair dealing. Those little things told me you were someone who thought about life, someone who had depths I could spend years discovering." Clara felt her throat tighten. She'd written that letter in desperation, trying to be honest because she had nothing else to offer. She hadn't imagined it might actually draw someone to her. "I'm not," she started, then stopped. "I'm not sure I can be what you're hoping for." "I'm not asking you to be anything except yourself," Ethan said quietly. "That's all I want, Clara. Just a chance to know who you really are, and for you to know who I am. And then we'll see if we can build something together." They finished the meal in silence, but it felt different now, less awkward, more contemplative. Clara helped clear the dishes despite Ethan's protests, and they washed them together, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised them both. "We should turn in early," Ethan said when they'd finished. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day with the wedding and all. But before we do, I want to ask you something." Clara tensed, waiting for the real demands to begin. "Are you truly willing to marry me? Because if you're having doubts, if you want more time to think about it, I'll understand. We can wait. I can set you up in town for a while, let you get to know me before making any final decisions. I don't want you to feel trapped." Clara stared at him, searching for the trap in his words. But his expression was open, sincere. He actually meant it. He would let her go if she asked, give her time if she needed it. And that, more than anything else he'd said or done, made her want to stay. Because a man who would offer freedom was perhaps a man who could be trusted with the risk of commitment. "I'll marry you tomorrow," Clara said softly. "I came here to be your wife, and She swallowed hard. "I want to try. To make this work. Whatever that means." Ethan's smile was small but genuine, reaching his eyes and making him look years younger. "Good. That's real good, Clara. Now get some rest. I'll wake you in the morning." Clara climbed the stairs to her room, changed into her nightgown, and slipped between the clean sheets of her bed. Through the window, she could see stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. More stars than she'd ever seen in the city, brilliant and close in the clear mountain air. She thought about Ethan's words, his surprising kindness, his offer of partnership. It still didn't feel real, still felt like something that would shatter when the light of day revealed the truth. But for tonight, lying in this clean bed, in this quiet house with a kind man down the hall, Clara allowed herself to hope. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Clara woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the warm scent of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. She dressed carefully in her best dress, a simple dark blue cotton that was worn but clean, and pinned her dark hair up neatly. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman trying to look composed, but her eyes betrayed her nervousness. Downstairs, Ethan had already prepared breakfast, eggs, bacon, and fresh bread that he admitted sheepishly he'd bought from a neighbor the previous day. They ate quickly, both of them quiet with the weight of what the day would bring. The ride back to town felt shorter than the journey the previous day. Ethan pointed out landmarks along the way. The creek where he sometimes fished, the spot where he'd seen a bear last spring, the ridge where the wildflowers bloomed in July. Clara listened, tucking away these small pieces of information about her new home. The church was a simple wooden structure at the edge of town. Reverend Mitchell was a kind-faced older man who seemed unsurprised by the nature of their marriage. Clara supposed he'd performed this ceremony before for other couples brought together by necessity rather than romance. 2 witnesses were summoned from the general store, a matronly woman named Mrs. Henderson and her taciturn husband. They stood as Clara and Ethan faced each other before the Reverend. The ceremony was brief, almost businesslike. Clara repeated the vows in a steady voice, making promises that felt impossibly weighty. To love, to honor, to cherish. She glanced at Ethan as she spoke and found him watching her with that same intense but gentle gaze he had had the previous day. When it was Ethan's turn, his voice was firm and clear. He slid a simple gold band onto her finger. Nothing fancy, but it fit perfectly and gleamed warmly against her skin. Clara hadn't expected a ring at all, and the gesture made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Mitchell announced. Clara tensed, but Ethan simply leaned forward and pressed a gentle, chaste kiss to her forehead. It was over in a moment, but the tenderness of it made Clara's breath catch. They signed the marriage certificate, thanked the Reverend, and accepted congratulations from the witnesses. Mrs. Henderson pressed Clara's hand warmly. "Welcome to Ridgeway, dear. Ethan's a good man. You've chosen well." Clara wanted to point out that she'd chosen survival, not a man, but she simply smiled and thanked the woman. The ride home, she supposed she could call it home now, was quiet again. Clara kept glancing at the ring on her finger, still half expecting to wake up and find this had all been a dream or a trap about to spring closed. "Are you hungry?" Ethan asked as they pulled up to the house. "We could have some lunch, and then I thought I'd show you around the ranch properly. Let you get a feel for the place." "That would be nice," Clara agreed. The word nice felt inadequate for the strange mixture of fear and hope churning inside her, but it was all she could manage. They prepared lunch together, cold ham and cheese with bread, simple but filling. Then Ethan gave Clara a tour of the property. He showed her the barn with its handful of horses and dairy cows, the chicken coop where hens scratched and pecked, the garden plot that had been neglected but could be revived, the root cellar stocked with preserved vegetables. "I've been running about 50 head of cattle," Ethan explained as they walked. "Not a huge operation, but enough to make a decent living. I'm hoping to expand over the next few years, maybe get the herd up to 100. But that's going to take time and work." "What can I do to help?" Clara asked. Ethan paused, turning to look at her with surprise. "You want to help with the ranch work?" "You said you wanted a partner," Clara reminded him. "I may not know much about ranching, but I can learn. I'm strong, and I'm not afraid of hard work." Something warm and pleased crossed Ethan's face. "We'll start slow. The chickens and the garden would be a good place to begin. Those were my mother's domain when she was alive, and I've let them go to seed a bit. If you could get them back in order, that would be a real help. And then, if you want to learn more, I can teach you." They spent the rest of the afternoon working side by side. Ethan showed Clara the chicken coop, explaining the feeding schedule and how to collect eggs. Then they tackled the garden together, pulling weeds and assessing what could be salvaged. Clara found herself relaxing as they worked, the familiar motions of gardening soothing some of her anxiety. Ethan was patient, answering her questions without making her feel foolish. He pointed out which plants were vegetables and which were weeds, showed her where the tools were kept, and praised her quick learning. By the time the sun began to sink toward the mountains, Claire's hands were dirty and her back was sore, but she felt more settled than she had in months. They prepared supper together, Claire insisting on doing the cooking this time, and ate as the last light faded from the sky. Then they settled into the main room, Ethan adding wood to the fireplace even though the evening was mild. "Tell me about yourself," Ethan said, settling onto the sofa. "Your letters gave me some idea, but I want to know more. What was your life like before you came here?" Clara hesitated, unused to anyone caring about her story, but something about the quiet evening and Ethan's genuine interest loosened her tongue. She told him about growing up in Pennsylvania, about her father who had worked in a factory and her mother who had taken in sewing to make ends meet. She described how they died within months of each other when she was 17, leaving her alone and penniless. "I lived with various relatives after that," Claire continued, her voice carefully neutral. "Shuffled from house to house. Everyone had reasons why they couldn't keep me long term. I was useful for childcare or housework, but I was also another mouth to feed, and no one wanted that responsibility permanently." "That must have been hard," Ethan said quietly. "Never having a real home." "I learned not to get attached to places or people," Clara admitted. "It was easier that way when it was time to move on." "And your uncle? The one you were living with when you answered my advertisement?" Clara's hands tightened in her lap. His expectations were not acceptable. I left as soon as I could arrange it." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't press for details. "I'm glad you got out. And I'm glad you ended up here." "Are you?" Clara asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. "Truly? I'm not. I don't know how to be a wife, Ethan. I don't know what you really want from me, and I don't know if I can give it." Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression serious. "I want exactly what I said yesterday. A partner. Someone to talk to work alongside, to build a life with. I'm not expecting you to know how to be a wife. Hell, I don't really know how to be a husband. We'll figure it out together." "And if we can't?" Clara whispered. "What if this doesn't work?" "Then we'll deal with that if it happens. But I think we can make it work, Clara. I really do. Because we're both honest and we're both willing to try. That's more than a lot of marriages start with." Clara wanted to believe him. She was starting to believe him, despite all her defenses and warnings. This man who had given her a room of her own, who had married her without demanding anything in return, who spoke to her like an equal. He was either the most elaborate manipulator she'd ever met, or he was actually genuine. And Clara was beginning to think it might be the latter. The evening stretched on, and they talked about smaller things. Ethan's plans for the ranch, Clara's love of reading, the differences between eastern and western landscapes. It was comfortable, easy in a way Clara hadn't expected. When she finally climbed the stairs to her room, she felt less like a stranger in a strange house and more like she might actually belong here. Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. Clara woke each morning to find Ethan already up, starting the coffee and planning the day's work. They'd have breakfast together, discussing what needed to be done. Then they'd split up, Ethan to the cattle and horses, Clara to the chickens and garden and house. But often, Ethan would find reasons to work near where Clara was. He'd fix the fence around the chicken coop while she collected eggs. He'd help her carry water for the garden while explaining the best times to plant different vegetables in this climate. They'd work together to repair a broken step or reorganize the root cellar. Claire discovered that Ethan had been truthful about wanting a partner's input. He asked her opinion on everything from where to put a new fence line to whether they should try raising pigs. At first, Clara demurred, insisting she knew nothing about ranching, but Ethan was persistent. "You're smart, and you see things differently than I do," he'd say. "That's valuable. I've been doing things the same way for years because that's how my father did them. Fresh eyes might spot ways to do things better." So Clara started offering suggestions. She pointed out that the chickens would produce better if their coop was cleaned more regularly. She suggested reorganizing the root cellar to make the preserved goods easier to access. She even timidly proposed that they might do better selling eggs in town if they packaged them more attractively. Ethan listened to every idea, implemented most of them, and thanked her genuinely for her help. Slowly, Clara began to feel like she actually was contributing, like she had value beyond just cooking and cleaning. The evenings became Clara's favorite time. After the work was done and supper was eaten, they'd sit in the main room. Sometimes Ethan would read the newspaper while Clara mended clothes. Sometimes she'd read aloud from her book of Shakespeare while he whittled. Sometimes they'd just talk, sharing stories about their pasts or dreams for the future. Clara learned that Ethan had always wanted to expand the ranch but had been held back by his father's debts. She learned that he loved the land with a fierce passion, that he could tell you the name of every peak in the mountain range, that he knew where the eagles nested and when the elk migrated through. She learned that he was lonely in a way that went bone deep, that he'd spent 5 years working himself to exhaustion, partly to keep from feeling the emptiness of the house. And Ethan learned about Clara. He discovered that she had a sharp wit that emerged once she felt safe enough to show it. He learned that she loved words, loved the rhythm and beauty of language. He discovered that she noticed details he missed, the way the light fell through the windows at different times of day, the patterns frost made on the windows, the songs different birds sang. He also learned, without her saying it directly, that she'd been hurt, not just by her uncle, but by years of being unwanted, of being useful, but not valued. She flinched sometimes when he moved quickly. She apologized for things that didn't need apologizing for. She watched him carefully, as if waiting for him to transform into someone cruel. It broke Ethan's heart a little, seeing her wariness. But he was patient. He made sure his movements were predictable, his words kind. He never raised his voice, never made demands. Slowly, so slowly that he almost didn't notice it happening, Clara began to relax around him. One evening, about a month after their wedding, Clara was reading aloud from a particularly dramatic passage in Shakespeare when she stumbled over a word and laughed at herself. It was the first time Ethan had heard her truly laugh. Not a polite chuckle, but a genuine, spontaneous sound of amusement. He looked up from his whittling to find her smiling, her face transformed by the expression. In that moment, backlit by the fire and softened by happiness, she was beautiful. Not just pleasant-looking, but genuinely, breathtakingly beautiful. And Ethan felt his heart do something strange in his chest, something warm and terrifying and wonderful all at once. He'd been attracted to Clara from the moment she'd stepped off that stagecoach, dusty and determined and trying so hard to be brave. But this was different. This wasn't just attraction. This was the beginning of something deeper, something that could grow into love if he let it. If she let it. Clara caught him staring and her smile faded, replaced by uncertainty. "What?" "Nothing," Ethan said quickly. You have a nice laugh. I'm glad you feel comfortable enough to let me hear it." Clara's expression softened. "I do feel comfortable. I didn't expect to, but I do. You're—" She paused, seeming to search for words. "You're kind, Ethan. Genuinely kind. I'm not used to that." "You deserve kindness," Ethan said firmly. "You deserve a lot of things you probably haven't gotten." Clara looked down at her book, but Ethan saw the color rising in her cheeks. "Thank you for that. For all of this. I know I haven't said it enough, but I'm grateful. This is more than I could have hoped for." "It's more than I hoped for too," Ethan admitted. "When I sent that advertisement, I was just hoping for someone who wouldn't make me miserable. Instead, I got—" He gestured vaguely at her. "Someone who makes me want to come home at the end of the day. Someone who makes this house feel like a home instead of just a building." They looked at each other across the room, something unspoken passing between them. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was the foundation love could build on. Respect, liking, the beginning of trust. Claire returned to her reading and Ethan to his whittling, but the air between them felt different now. Warmer, more full of possibility. As spring turned toward summer, their partnership deepened. Clara took on more responsibilities with the ranch, learning to help with the cattle and even learning to ride one of the gentler horses. Ethan taught her patiently, never mocking her mistakes, always encouraging her progress. They fell into rhythms and routines that felt natural, comfortable. Clara would wake to find Ethan had already started the coffee. They'd work together to prepare breakfast, moving around each other in the kitchen with increasing ease. They'd plan their day over the meal, dividing tasks, but always finding ways to work together on at least part of it. Clara had never imagined that marriage could be like this, a true partnership where both people contributed and both people mattered. She'd expected duty and obligation. Instead, She was finding friendship and respect. And maybe, just maybe, the stirrings of something more. Because she couldn't help noticing the way Ethan's eyes crinkled when he smiled. Couldn't help appreciating the strength in his hands when he helped her down from the wagon. Couldn't help feeling safe when he was near, protected in a way that didn't feel stifling but rather comforting. She caught herself looking for him during the day, finding excuses to work near where he was. She noticed that her heart lifted when she heard his voice or his footsteps. She discovered that she enjoyed making him smile, that his rare laughter made her feel like she'd accomplished something worthwhile. Clara didn't have a name for these feelings yet. She'd never experienced them before, never had the luxury of considering romantic love, but they were there, growing quietly, adding warmth to her days. One evening in early July, they'd worked late putting up a new fence. The work had been hot and exhausting, and they'd fallen into bed, separate beds and separate rooms, without even eating supper. But Clara woke in the middle of the night, hungry and restless. She crept downstairs intending to find some bread and cheese, but she found the lamp already lit in the kitchen and Ethan sitting at the table with a plate of food. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked with a tired smile. "I was hungrier than I thought," Clara admitted, moving to cut herself some bread. "Sit down. I'll get it for you." They sat together in the quiet kitchen, eating cold ham and bread, talking in low voices about nothing in particular. Outside, crickets sang and a warm breeze drifted through the open window. "I like this," Clara said suddenly. "These quiet moments with you. I never thought—" She trailed off, not sure how to finish. "Never thought what?" Ethan prompted gently. "Never thought I could be happy," Clara whispered. "Never thought that was something that could happen to me, but I think I might be happy here, with you." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand, the first time he'd touched her beyond helping her up or down from the wagon. His hand was warm and calloused, completely engulfing hers. "I'm happy too. Happier than I've been in years. Maybe ever." They sat there in the lamplight, hands linked across the table, and Clara felt something shift inside her. This was real. This partnership, this growing affection, this life they were building. It was real, and it was hers. Not something that would be taken away, not something she had to apologize for. It was hers, and she was allowing herself, finally, to want it. The morning after their midnight conversation in the kitchen, Clara woke with a strange lightness in her chest. Sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, warm and golden, and for the first time since arriving in Colorado, she didn't feel the familiar weight of anxiety pressing down on her. She dressed quickly, pinning her hair with more care than usual, catching herself humming softly as she worked. Downstairs, Ethan was already at the stove, but he turned when he heard her footsteps. His face lit up with a smile that made something flutter in Clara's stomach. "Morning," he said. "I was just thinking about what you said last night, about being happy." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I meant it." "I know you did. That's what makes it matter." He poured her a cup of coffee, their fingers brushing as he handed it to her. The brief contact sent a jolt through Clara that she tried to ignore. "I was thinking maybe we could take the afternoon off. There's a spot up in the high meadow I'd like to show you. The wildflowers should be in full bloom right about now." "Take the afternoon off?" Clara repeated, surprised. In her experience, work was constant, unending. The idea of simply stopping to enjoy something felt almost scandalous. "Why not? We've been working hard. The ranch won't fall apart if we take a few hours for ourselves." Ethan's eyes held a hint of mischief. "Besides, I want to show off a little. That meadow is one of the prettiest spots on the whole property." Clara found herself smiling. "All right, I'd like that." They worked through the morning with unusual efficiency, both of them moving with purpose. Clara noticed Ethan watching her as she fed the chickens, and when she caught his eye, he didn't look away. Instead, he smiled, and Clara felt that flutter again, stronger this time. After lunch, Ethan saddled 2 horses. Clara's riding had improved significantly over the past months, though she still felt nervous mounting up. Ethan steadied the mare as Clara settled into the saddle, his hand lingering on her knee for just a moment longer than necessary. They rode out across the ranch, following a trail that wound up into the hills. The day was perfect, warm but not hot, with a breeze that carried the scent of pine and sage. Clara found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's gait, enjoying the feel of the sun on her face. Ethan rode slightly ahead, occasionally pointing out landmarks or wildlife. He showed her where a family of foxes denned, where he'd once seen a mountain lion, where the best fishing spots were on the creek. Clara absorbed it all, memorizing these details about the land that was now her home. The trail climbed steadily, and then suddenly they emerged into a meadow that took Clara's breath away. It stretched out before them like a carpet of color: purple lupines, yellow sunflowers, white and pink columbines, red Indian paintbrush. The flowers swayed in the breeze, creating waves of color against the backdrop of dark pines and distant mountains. "Oh," Clara breathed, pulling her horse to a stop. "Oh, Ethan, it's beautiful." "Knew you'd like it," Ethan said, his voice warm with satisfaction. He dismounted and came to help Clara down, his hand spanning her waist as he lifted her from the saddle. For a moment they stood close, his hands still on her waist, her palms resting on his shoulders. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. Ethan cleared his throat and stepped back, though his eyes held a warmth that made Clara's breath catch. "Come on, there's a good spot to sit near those aspens." They settled on a flat rock overlooking the meadow, the horses grazing contentedly nearby. For a long moment, they sat in comfortable silence, just taking in the beauty around them. "My mother loved this spot," Ethan said quietly. "She used to bring me up here when I was a boy, said it was important to remember that life wasn't just about work, that there had to be room for beauty too." She sounds like she was wise. She was. Kind, too. Like you. Ethan turned to look at Clara. "I think she would have liked you." Clara felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected compliment. "I wish I could have met her." "Me too." Ethan was quiet for a moment, then continued. "She died when I was 15. Fever took her quick. My father, he just folded up after that, threw himself into work and never really came back. I understood it better once I was older. He loved her so much that losing her broke something in him." "That's terribly sad," Clara whispered. "It is. But it's also kind of beautiful, isn't it? To love someone that much. To build a life so intertwined with theirs that losing them feels like losing part of yourself." Ethan picked a stem of lupine, twirling it between his fingers. "That's what I want, Clara. Not just a partnership for the sake of running a ranch. I want what my parents had. That deep connection, that kind of love that makes life richer." Clara's mouth went dry. "Ethan, I know it's only been a couple of months," he continued, his voice low and earnest. "I know we're still getting to know each other, but I need you to understand what I'm hoping for here. I'm not content with just friendship, even though I value the friendship we've built. I want more. I want—" He turned to face her fully. "I want to court you properly, Clara. Even though we're already married, I want to do this right. I want to earn your affection, your trust, your love, if you'll give it." Clara stared at him, her heart racing. Part of her wanted to retreat, to protect herself from the vulnerability his words demanded. But a larger part, the part that had been growing stronger since that night in the kitchen, wanted to leap forward into this possibility. "You don't have to answer now," Ethan said quickly, misreading her silence. "I just wanted you to know where I stand, what I'm hoping for. Take all the time you need to—" "Yes," Clara interrupted, her voice shaking slightly. "Yes, I want that too." Ethan's eyes widened. "You do?" "I'm frightened," Clara admitted. "I've never done this before, never let myself want something like this. But when I'm with you, I feel safe. I feel valued. And lately, I've been feeling—" She struggled to find the words. "More than that. I find myself thinking about you during the day. Looking forward to our evenings together, missing you when we're working separately. I don't know if that's love, but it feels like it could become love, if we let it." A slow smile spread across Ethan's face, transforming it with joy. "That's all I needed to hear, that you're willing to try, to see where this could go." He reached out and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Clara looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, both of them marked by work but fitting together perfectly. "So how does one court someone they're already married to?" Clara asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. Ethan laughed. "I have no idea. I guess we make it up as we go." He squeezed her hand gently. But I was thinking I could start by telling you that you're beautiful, that every day I discover something new about you that fascinates me, that your laugh is my favorite sound, and your smile makes my whole day better." Clara felt her cheeks burn, but she couldn't stop smiling. "Those are pretty words, Ethan Cole." "They're true words." He lifted their joined hands and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was so tender, so sweet, that Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. They sat there for a long time, hands clasped, watching the flowers dance in the breeze. Clara leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. It felt natural, right? Like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. "Thank you," Clara whispered. "For what?" "For being patient. For giving me time to trust you. For seeing something in me worth courting." "Clara, you're worth everything good in this world," Ethan said firmly. "I just hope I can be worthy of you." They rode back to the ranch as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, their horses side by side on the trail. Clara couldn't stop smiling, couldn't stop stealing glances at Ethan. When he caught her looking, he'd grin back, and Clara would feel that wonderful flutter in her chest all over again. The evening routine felt different now, charged with new awareness. Ethan helped Clara down from her horse, his hands lingering on her waist. Their fingers brushed as they worked together to prepare supper. When they sat down to eat, Ethan reached across the table and took her hand, and they said grace together. A new habit Clara found she enjoyed. After supper, they settled in the main room as usual, but instead of sitting separately, Ethan gestured to the space beside him on the sofa. Clara hesitated only a moment before joining him, tucking herself against his side as his arm came around her shoulders. "Read to me?" Ethan asked softly. Clara picked up her Shakespeare, but found she kept losing her place, too distracted by Ethan's warmth, his steady breathing, the way his thumb traced small circles on her shoulder. Finally, she set the book aside with a laugh. "I can't concentrate." "Good," Ethan murmured. "Neither can I." He shifted to look at her, his expression tender. "Can I kiss you, Clara? A real kiss this time, not just on the forehead?" Clara's heart hammered, but she nodded. Ethan cupped her face gently, giving her every chance to pull away. Then he lowered his lips to hers in a kiss that was soft and sweet and full of promise. Clara's eyes fluttered closed as she leaned into it, her hand coming up to rest on his chest, where she could feel his heart beating as fast as her own. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing harder. Ethan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes still closed. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" "Wanted to make sure you were ready. Wanted to make sure you wanted it too." He pulled back to look at her. "Did you? Want it, I mean?" "Yes," Clara whispered. "Very much." They kissed again, longer this time, Clara's fingers tangling in Ethan's hair as his arms tightened around her. It was intoxicating, overwhelming, wonderful. When they finally broke apart, Clara was flushed and breathless, and happier than she could ever remember being. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Clara could have imagined. Ethan seemed determined to make up for the unconventional start to their marriage with small gestures of affection and care. He picked wildflowers and left them on her pillow. He made her coffee exactly how she liked it every morning. He found reasons to touch her, a hand on the small of her back as they worked, fingers brushing as they passed dishes at the table, an arm around her shoulders as they sat together in the evenings. And he talked to her, really talked. He asked about her dreams, her fears, her opinions on everything from the best way to organize a barn to what she thought about westward expansion. He listened to her answers with genuine interest, treating her thoughts and feelings as valuable. Clara blossomed under this attention. She found herself laughing more, speaking more freely, offering opinions without the fear that they'd be dismissed or mocked. She learned to accept Ethan's compliments without immediately deflecting them. She discovered that she liked being courted, liked feeling desired and valued and cherished. Their physical affection grew gradually, carefully. Stolen kisses in the barn, embraces that lasted longer each time, hands that wandered a little further before pulling back. Ethan never pushed, never demanded more than Clara was ready to give, but Clara could see the restraint it cost him, could feel the tension in his body when they kissed, and she found, to her surprise, that she wanted more too. The desire that had been so foreign to her was growing, fueled by Ethan's gentle passion and her own deepening feelings. She started thinking about the separate bedrooms, about the invisible line they hadn't yet crossed. One evening in late August, after a particularly long kiss that left them both flushed and breathing hard, Clara pulled back and looked at Ethan seriously. "I want to ask you something." "Anything," Ethan said, his voice rough. "Why do we still sleep in separate rooms?" Ethan went very still. "Because I wanted you to feel safe. Wanted you to have your own space until you were ready to share mine." "And if I'm ready now?" Clara's heart was racing, but she held his gaze steadily. "What if I want to be your wife in every way? Not because I think I have to, but because I want to." Ethan's breath caught. "Clara, are you sure? Because once we cross that line, there's no going back. I need to know you're certain." "I'm certain," Clara said firmly. "I love you, Ethan. I think I've been falling in love with you for weeks, maybe months, and I want all of you. I want to share your bed, your life, everything." "You love me?" Ethan's voice was wondering, his eyes searching her face. "Yes, I love you. I didn't know what love felt like before, but now I do. It feels like coming home. It feels like safety and joy and possibility all wrapped together. It feels like you." Ethan pulled her close, kissing her deeply. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "I love you too, Clara. So much it scares me sometimes. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy, making you feel loved and valued and cherished." "Then take me to bed," Clara whispered, surprised by her own boldness. "Make me your wife." Ethan stood, pulling Clara up with him. He led her up the stairs, but instead of turning toward his room at the end of the hall, he paused. "Your room or mine?" Clara appreciated that he asked, that he gave her the choice. "Yours. I want to wake up in your bed tomorrow." Ethan's room was larger than hers, with a bigger bed and windows that faced the mountains. He lit the lamp on the bedside table, then turned to face Clara. In the soft light, he looked both nervous and eager. "I should tell you," Clara said, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't really know what I'm doing. I know the basics, but I've never actually—" "Neither have I," Ethan admitted, and Clara's eyes widened in surprise. "I've been too busy with the ranch, and I never wanted it to be just— I wanted it to mean something. I wanted it to be with someone I loved." Something in Clara's chest loosened at his confession. They would navigate this together, both of them new to this intimacy, both of them learning. Ethan stepped closer, his hands cupping her face. "We'll figure it out together, and if anything doesn't feel right, if you want to stop at any point, you just say so. Promise me." "I promise," Clara whispered. He kissed her softly, then reached up to pull the pins from her hair. The dark waves tumbled down around her shoulders, and Ethan ran his fingers through them with wonder. "Beautiful," he murmured. "You're so beautiful." Clara's fingers moved to the buttons of his shirt, fumbling slightly. Ethan covered her hands with his, stilling them. "We don't have to rush. We have all night. We have forever." So they took their time, helping each other with buttons and laces, pausing often to kiss and touch and whisper words of love and reassurance. When they finally came together, it was tender and awkward and perfect all at once. Two people who loved each other, learning each other's bodies, discovering the intimacy that transformed a marriage of convenience into something sacred. Afterward, Clara lay in Ethan's arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. She felt changed, transformed in some fundamental way, not just physically, but emotionally. The last wall she'd been holding up had finally come down. "No regrets?" Ethan asked softly, his fingers trailing through her hair. "None," Clara said honestly. "You?" "Only that we waited this long," Ethan said with a soft laugh. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I love you, Clara Cole. My wife, my partner, my love." "I love you too," Clara whispered, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The seasons began to shift, summer giving way to fall. The leaves on the aspens turned gold. The air grew crisp in the mornings, and Clara and Ethan settled into their new intimacy with joy. They shared a bed now, waking wrapped in each other's arms, stealing kisses throughout the day, falling asleep each night satisfied and content. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Clara's suggestions for improving egg production and expanding the garden had worked beautifully. Ethan's careful management of the cattle herd was paying off. They were making plans to expand, to build onto the house, to grow their operation. One morning in early October, Clara woke feeling nauseous. She barely made it outside before losing her breakfast. Ethan found her a few minutes later, pale and shaking, and immediately insisted on riding to town for the doctor. But Clara stopped him with a trembling smile. "I don't need a doctor. I need to tell you something." Ethan's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Are you?" "I think so. I'm almost certain." Clara pressed a hand to her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." The joy that lit Ethan's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He whooped with happiness, sweeping Clara into his arms and spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop before she got sick again. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We're going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Clara asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it," Ethan said, pulling her close. Overwhelmed, terrified, excited, grateful. All of it at once, but mostly just full, like my heart might burst. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Ethan became even more attentive, if that was possible, insisting Clara rest more, taking on tasks she'd normally do. Clara protested at first, but eventually gave in, enjoying being cared for. As winter settled over the ranch, they spent long evenings by the fire, Ethan's hand resting on Clara's growing belly, feeling the baby move and kick. They talked about names, about the future, about what kind of parents they wanted to be. "I want our children to know they're loved," Clara said one night. "I want them to grow up secure and valued, never doubting that they matter." "They will," Ethan promised, "just like their mother knows she's loved and valued now." "I do know that," Clara said softly. "Every single day, you show me. I never thought I could be this happy, Ethan. I never thought life could be this good." "It's only going to get better," Ethan said, kissing her temple. "We're building something here, Clara. Not just a ranch, but a family, a legacy. Something that will last long after we're gone." The baby came in early spring, on a morning when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom in the high meadow. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Ethan thought he might lose his mind with worry. But Clara was strong, and when the midwife finally placed a squalling, red-faced infant in her arms, Ethan's tears of relief matched Clara's tears of joy. "A son," the midwife announced, "healthy and strong." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Clara, the other hand gently touching the baby's downy head. His son. Their son. "What should we name him?" Clara asked, exhausted but radiant. "What about James?" Ethan suggested. "After your father." Clara's eyes filled with fresh tears. "You remembered." "Of course I remembered. You told me about him months ago." Ethan kissed her forehead. "James Cole. What do you think?" "I think it's perfect," Clara whispered, looking down at their son. "Welcome to the world, James." The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Clara had never been so tired, but she'd also never been so full of purpose and love. Watching Ethan with James, the gentleness in those work-roughened hands, the wonder in his eyes, the soft voice he used when talking to his son, made Clara fall in love with him all over again. They worked as a team, splitting the night feedings, taking turns so the other could rest. Ethan learned to change diapers and swaddle the baby with surprising skill. Clara marveled at how naturally fatherhood came to him, how patient and devoted he was. "You're a wonderful father," she told him one evening, watching as he rocked James to sleep. "I have a good teacher," Ethan replied, nodding toward Clara. "Watching you with him, seeing how naturally you know what he needs, it amazes me every day." As James grew from infant to baby to toddler, the ranch continued to flourish. They expanded the herd, built a larger barn, added rooms onto the house. Clara's garden grew into a productive plot that not only fed the family, but provided surplus to sell in town. Ethan's reputation as a fair dealer and skilled rancher spread, bringing opportunities for partnerships and growth. But more than the material success, what mattered was the life they'd built. James's first steps were taken between his parents' outstretched arms. His first words were "Mama" and "Papa," spoken with equal love. The house that had once been empty and echoing was now filled with laughter and life. One evening, when James was nearly 2, Clara and Ethan sat on the porch watching their son play in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and Clara felt that familiar sense of contentment wash over her. "Do you ever think about where we started?" she asked Ethan softly. "That day I stepped off the stagecoach, so frightened and expecting so little?" "I think about it often," Ethan admitted. "I think about how close we came to missing this. If you hadn't answered my advertisement, if I hadn't had the courage to tell you what I really wanted, if either of us had been too scared to take a chance on this." "But we did take the chance," Clara said, reaching for his hand. "We chose to trust each other, to build something together. And look what we created." Ethan squeezed her hand, watching James toddle after a butterfly with determination. "I want more of this, more children, more life, more of everything we've built together. What do you think?" Clara smiled, her free hand moving to her stomach, where another secret grew. "I think that's a very good idea. In fact, I have some news that might make you happy." Ethan's eyes widened, then shone with joy, as understanding dawned once again. And as he pulled Clara into his arms, both of them laughing while James demanded their attention with cheerful babbling, Clara thought about the woman she'd been when she arrived, broken, scared, expecting nothing. That woman could never have imagined this happiness, could never have dreamed that love could feel like this, solid and steady and absolutely certain. But Clara wasn't that woman anymore. She was Clara Cole, beloved wife, cherished mother, equal partner in a life that exceeded every dream she'd never dared to dream. The second pregnancy brought both joy and challenges Clara hadn't anticipated. While carrying James, she'd been young and resilient, bouncing back quickly from morning sickness and fatigue. But now, with a toddler to chase and a ranch to help run, the exhaustion settled into her bones and refused to leave. Ethan noticed immediately. He found her one afternoon in the garden, sitting on the ground among the tomato plants, her face pale and drawn. "That's it," he said firmly, helping her to her feet. "You're resting for the remainder of the day." "The weeding needs to be done," Clara protested weakly. "The weeding can wait. You cannot." He guided her to the house, settling her on the sofa with a quilt. "I'll bring you some tea and something to eat. And before you argue, remember that you made me promise to take care of you. Well, I'm keeping that promise." Clara wanted to object, but truthfully, she was too tired. She closed her eyes, listening to Ethan moving around in the kitchen, hearing James's happy babbling as he played with his wooden blocks. The sounds of her family, safe and content, lulled her into a light sleep. When she woke, the afternoon sun had shifted lower in the sky. Ethan sat in the chair across from her, James asleep in his lap, both of them watching her with identical expressions of concern and love. "How long was I asleep?" Clara asked, her voice rough. "About 2 hours. You needed it." Ethan shifted carefully so as not to wake James. "Clara, I've been thinking. Maybe we should hire some help around here, just for a few months, until after the baby comes and you're back on your feet." "We can't afford that," Clara said automatically. "Actually, we can. The ranch is doing well, better than it ever has, and even if it stretches us a bit, your health is worth more than money." His voice was gentle but firm. "I won't have you running yourself into the ground trying to do everything. That's not what partners do." Clara's throat tightened. Even now, years into their marriage, Ethan's unwavering support still caught her off guard sometimes. "All right, but just until after the baby." "Just until after the baby," Ethan agreed, though Clara suspected he had no intention of letting the help go even then. True to his word, Ethan hired a young man named Tom from town to help with the heavier ranch work, and a widow named Mrs. Patterson to assist with the house and keeping an eye on James. Clara initially bristled at having another woman in her kitchen, but Mrs. Patterson was kind and tactful, always asking Clara's preference before making decisions and treating the house as Clara's domain. "Your husband loves you something fierce," Mrs. Patterson observed one day as they worked together preparing preserves. "Not many men would think to get help for their wives. Most just expect women to manage no matter what." "Ethan's different," Clara said softly. watching through the window as her husband showed James how to feed the chickens. He always has been. You're lucky, but I'd wager he feels lucky too. The way he looks at you, like you hung the moon and stars. Mrs. Patterson smiled. That's the kind of love that lasts a lifetime. The baby came in November, during the first snowfall of the season. This labor was faster than James's had been, and when the midwife placed a tiny, perfect daughter in Clara's arms, Clara burst into tears of overwhelming joy. A girl, she whispered, looking up at Ethan, who stood beside the bed, his own eyes suspiciously bright. We have a daughter. She's perfect, Ethan said hoarsely, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. Her fingers immediately wrapped around his, gripping with surprising strength. Just like her mother. They named her Sarah after Ethan's mother, and if possible, Ethan fell even more deeply in love with his family. He was gentle and protective with his daughter, but he also made sure James didn't feel displaced. He carved the boy a new set of toy horses and spent extra time with him in the evenings, reading stories and playing games. Clara watched her husband transform into the father she'd always hoped their children would have, patient, loving, present. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with Sarah when she cried at night, and somehow still found time to tell Clara every day that he loved her. The years flowed by like water, each season bringing new joys and challenges. James grew into a bright, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, eager to learn about the ranch. Sarah was more reserved, thoughtful, with her mother's love of books and her father's quiet strength. 2 years after Sarah came another son, Michael, and then 2 years after that, twin girls they named Emma and Lucy. The house they'd expanded twice already seemed to burst at the seams with life and laughter. Boots muddy from the fields cluttered the entry. Children's toys scattered across the floor. The sounds of playing, arguing, laughing, crying filled every corner. It was chaotic and exhausting and absolutely wonderful. But it wasn't always easy. There were lean years when drought threatened the cattle and they had to make hard decisions about which animals to sell. There were illnesses that kept Clara up for nights on end, pressing cool cloths to fevered foreheads and praying desperately for her children to recover. There were moments of doubt and fear, times when the weight of responsibility felt crushing. Through it all, Clara and Ethan held fast to each other. On the hardest days, when Clara felt overwhelmed by the needs of 5 children and the demands of the ranch, Ethan would find her and pull her close. We're in this together, he'd remind her. Whatever comes, we face it together. And when Ethan worried about money or weather or the 100 things that could go wrong on a ranch, Clara would take his hand and squeeze it gently. We've survived worse, she'd say. We'll survive this too. One particularly difficult summer, when drought had withered the grass and they'd been forced to sell half their herd just to feed the rest, Ethan came in from the fields looking defeated in a way Clara had rarely seen. I don't know if we're going to make it through this, he admitted, slumping into a chair at the kitchen table. If it doesn't rain soon, we're going to lose everything. Clara sat down across from him, reaching for his hands. Do you remember what you told me the day we met? You said you wanted a partner. Someone to share the decisions and the future with. I remember. Then let's be partners now. Let's figure this out together. Clara squeezed his hands. What if we approached the Hendersons about grazing some of our cattle on their north pasture? They have that creek that runs year-round. We could offer them a percentage of the sale when we take the cattle to market. Ethan looked up, hope flickering in his tired eyes. You think they'd go for it? Won't know unless we ask. And I was thinking, we still have those preserves I put up last fall. What if I took some to town and sold them? Mrs. Patterson said folks are always asking if I'd be willing to sell my jam and pickles. Clara, you already work too hard. So do you. That's what we do. We work hard together for our family. She smiled at him. Besides, the children are old enough to help more around here. James is nearly 10 now and Sarah's 8. They can take on more responsibility. Ethan pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. What did I ever do to deserve you? You saw me when I felt invisible. You valued me when I thought I was worthless. You loved me when I didn't know how to love myself. Clara pulled back to look at him. We deserve each other, Ethan, and we're going to get through this. They did get through it. The Hendersons agreed to the grazing arrangement. Clara's preserves sold so well that she could barely keep up with demand. The children stepped up, taking on chores without complaint, understanding somehow that the family needed everyone to contribute. And finally, blessedly, the rains came. But the drought taught them something valuable. It taught them that their strength wasn't in the cattle or the land or the house. It was in each other. As long as they had their family, as long as they worked together, they could weather any storm. The children grew. James became a skilled horseman, able to handle cattle with an expertise that made Ethan proud. Sarah developed a sharp mind for numbers and helped Clara keep the ranch's books with meticulous care. Michael inherited his father's way with animals, able to calm even the most skittish horse. The twins were still young but already showing their individual personalities. Emma bold and adventurous, Lucy gentle and artistic. One evening, when the children were all in bed and Clara and Ethan sat on the porch watching the stars, Ethan turned to his wife with a question that had been forming in his mind. "Are you happy, Clara? Truly happy?" Clara looked at him in surprise. "Of course I am. Why would you ask?" "Because this isn't the life you expected when you came here. 5 children, endless work, years of struggle. You could have had something easier, something different." "I could have," Clara agreed, "but I wouldn't have had you. I wouldn't have had this." She gestured to the house behind them, to the land stretching out in the darkness, to the life they'd built together. "Ethan, when I stepped off that stagecoach, I expected survival, just bare survival. Instead, I found love. I found purpose. I found a home and a family and a partner who treats me like an equal. How could I not be happy? Sometimes I worry that I've asked too much of you, that the work is too hard, the life too demanding." Clara took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Listen to me carefully, Ethan Cole. You have never asked too much of me. You've given me everything I never dared to want. Yes, the work is hard. Yes, there are days when I'm exhausted and overwhelmed. But I'd rather be exhausted and overwhelmed here with you than comfortable and empty anywhere else." Ethan kissed her then, deep and long, with all the passion of their early courtship and all the depth of their years together. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," Ethan said. "More now than the day we married. More every single day." "I love you too," Clara whispered. "Always." The ranch continued to grow and prosper. As the children got older, they each took on more significant roles. James, at 15, could run the cattle operation almost as well as his father. Sarah, at 13, had begun making suggestions for improving their business that were surprisingly astute. Even the younger children contributed in meaningful ways. But success brought new challenges. A large ranching syndicate moved into the area, buying up smaller properties and trying to pressure the remaining independent ranchers into selling. They made Ethan an offer that was generous on paper but would mean losing everything he and Clara had built. "What do you think?" Ethan asked Clara after the syndicate's representative had left. "I think they're trying to buy our lives, not just our land," Clara said firmly. "And our lives aren't for sale." It's a lot of money, Clara. Enough to set up the children comfortably, to make things easier." "When have we ever chosen easy over meaningful?" Clara challenged. "This ranch isn't just property, Ethan. It's James's legacy. It's where Sarah learned to ride. It's where Michael said his first words and where the twins took their first steps. It's where we fell in love. How do you put a price on that?" Ethan pulled her close. "You're right. You're absolutely right. We're not selling." The syndicate didn't take the refusal well. They tried intimidation, spreading rumors in town about the Coles' finances, even attempting to buy the water rights to the creek that fed the ranch. But Clara and Ethan stood firm, and they weren't alone. Other ranchers who'd been feeling pressured by the syndicate rallied together, forming a cooperative to protect their interests. Clara found herself at the center of organizing the cooperative's efforts. Her years of managing the ranch's books and her natural intelligence made her invaluable. She helped negotiate agreements, mediate disputes, and present a united front against outside pressure. The men who'd initially been skeptical of a woman in such a role quickly learned to respect her sharp mind and fair dealing. "Your mother's quite something," one of the neighboring ranchers told James one day. "Smart as a whip and twice as tough when she needs to be." James grinned with pride. "She's the toughest person I know. Don't let the pretty dresses fool you." Through it all, Clara and Ethan's partnership only deepened. They made every major decision together, weighing options and considering consequences. They supported each other through challenges and celebrated victories as a team. Their children watched and learned what a true partnership looked like: respect, communication, shared responsibility, unwavering support. One autumn evening, as they prepared for the cooperative's annual gathering at their ranch, Clara caught sight of herself in the mirror. She was 38 now, no longer the frightened young woman who'd arrived in Colorado. There were threads of silver in her dark hair, lines at the corners of her eyes from years of sun and laughter. Her hands were strong and capable, marked by work, but still gentle when they needed to be. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and meeting her eyes in the mirror. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different I look now. How different I am." "You're more beautiful now than the day I met you," Ethan said softly, "because now I can see everything you are in your face. Your strength, your kindness, your intelligence. You wear your life on your skin, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Clara turned in his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him. After all these years, his words could still make her heart flutter, could still make her feel cherished and desired. "We've built something good here, haven't we?" she whispered. "We've built something extraordinary," Ethan corrected, "and we're not done yet." The gathering that evening was a testament to what they'd created. The house overflowed with neighbors and friends, all of them part of the community Clara and Ethan had helped foster. The children moved easily among the guests, comfortable and confident, representing the family well. Food covered every surface, most of it contributed by Clara and the other ranch wives who'd learned to work together as effectively as their husbands. As the evening wore on and people began to drift toward their wagons, several of the ranchers pulled Ethan aside. "We've been talking," John Henderson said, "and we think the cooperative needs a president, someone to represent us in dealings with the syndicate and coordinate our efforts. We want it to be you, Ethan." Ethan glanced at Clara, who stood nearby talking with Mrs. Henderson. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but we hope you'll say yes. You and Clara both. You've shown us what standing together looks like. We trust you." After the last guests had left and the children were in bed, Clara and Ethan cleaned up together, falling into the familiar rhythm of shared work. "They want me to be president of the cooperative," Ethan said, drying a plate. "I know, I heard." Clara scrubbed at a stubborn spot on a pot. "What do you want to do?" "I want to know what you think. This would mean more time away from the ranch, more responsibility, more pressure." Clara set down the pot and turned to face him. "I think you'd be brilliant at it. You're fair, you're smart, and people trust you. But more importantly, I think it's the right thing to do. These people are counting on us, on what we've built together. How can we turn our backs on that?" "We," Ethan repeated with a smile. "Not I. We." "Of course we. Have you learned nothing in all these years?" Clara smiled back. "We're partners, Ethan. In everything. If you take this on, I'll be right there beside you, helping however I can." Ethan pulled her close, heedless of their wet hands and dirty apron. "I don't deserve you, Clara Cole." "Yes, you do," Clara said firmly. "You deserve every good thing in this world, because you've spent years making sure others have good things too. Now accept the compliment and kiss me." He did, and in that kiss was everything they'd built: partnership, passion, trust, and love that had only grown stronger with time and trial. Ethan accepted the position, and Clara became his invaluable partner in leading the cooperative. Together, they helped the small ranchers stand against outside pressure, negotiate better prices for their cattle, and build a community that supported each other through good times and bad. The years continued their steady march. The children grew into young adults, each finding their path while staying connected to the ranch and family that had shaped them. James took over more and more of the daily ranch operations, showing a natural leadership that made both his parents proud. Sarah shocked everyone by announcing her intention to study law, determined to help ranchers navigate the increasingly complex legal landscape. Michael apprenticed with the local veterinarian, combining his love of animals with practical skills. The twins were still finding their way, but both showed promise in different directions. Through it all, through every challenge and triumph, Clara and Ethan remained each other's constant. They still made time for each other, still stole moments alone when they could. They still held hands across the dinner table and kissed goodnight before sleeping. The passion of their early years had mellowed into something deeper and more sustaining, but it had never disappeared. One winter evening, Clara found Ethan in his study, going over the cooperative's accounts. She leaned against the doorframe, watching him work with the reading glasses he'd recently started needing. "Come to bed," she said softly. Ethan looked up, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Is that an invitation, Mrs. Cole?" "It's whatever you want it to be, Mr. Cole." Clara's eyes sparkled with the same mischief they'd held 20 years ago. "But I was thinking it might be nice to remind ourselves that we're not just partners in business and parents to 5 children. We're still husband and wife." Ethan was out of his chair in an instant, crossing to her and pulling her into his arms. "I don't need reminding of that, but I'm always happy for a demonstration." Clara laughed, the sound rich and warm and full of joy. And as Ethan led her upstairs to the bedroom they'd shared for 2 decades, as they came together with the passion and tenderness that had never faded, Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first terrified day stepping off the stagecoach to this moment of complete trust and love, every step had been worth it. Every challenge overcome, every fear conquered, every moment of doubt pushed through had led to this, a life so full and rich and beautiful that sometimes Clara could hardly believe it was real. But it was real. The man in her arms was real. The children sleeping down the hall were real. The ranch they'd built together, the community they'd helped create, the love they'd nurtured through years of work and dedication, all of it was real. And as Clara drifted off to sleep that night, safe in Ethan's embrace, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly who she was meant to be with, living exactly the life she'd been too afraid to dream of all those years ago. The morning Clara turned 45, she woke to find Ethan already dressed and sitting on the edge of their bed, watching her with an expression that was both tender and serious. "Happy birthday," he said softly, brushing a strand of silver-threaded hair from her face. Clara stretched, smiling up at him. "You're up early. Couldn't sleep?" "I've been thinking." Ethan took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm in that familiar way that still sent warmth through her. "About everything we've built, everything we've accomplished. And I realized something." "What's that?" "We've spent 27 years building this ranch, raising our children, supporting this community. We've worked ourselves to the bone, and I wouldn't change a single moment of it." He paused, his blue eyes holding hers. "But I think it's time we started thinking about what comes next." Clara sat up, suddenly alert. "What do you mean?" "James is 25 now. He's more than capable of running this place. Sarah's finishing her law studies and already has ranchers lining up for her services. Michael's established his veterinary practice. Even the twins are 19 and finding their paths." Ethan squeezed her hand. "They don't need us the way they used to. And I was thinking, maybe it's time we did something just for us." "Like what?" Clara asked, though her heart was already beating faster with possibility. "Like taking that trip back east you've talked about. Like spending a whole afternoon reading in the meadow without worrying about chores. Like waking up some mornings and just staying in bed because we can." Ethan's smile was gentle. "Like remembering that before we were parents and ranchers and community leaders, we were a man and woman who fell in love and wanted to build a life together. Maybe it's time to focus on that part again." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I'd like that. I'd like that very much." "Good." Ethan leaned in to kiss her, "because I already talked to James and he's ready to take on more responsibility. Starting today, we're going to work less and live more." But change, Clara discovered, was harder than either of them anticipated. Years of habit were difficult to break. She still woke at dawn, still found herself automatically heading for the chicken coop or the garden. Ethan still checked the cattle every morning, still worried about fence lines and water levels. It was Sarah who finally called them out on it during Sunday dinner, when the whole family gathered at the ranch house as they did every week. "Mother, Father," she said, setting down her fork with a decisive click. "You're both terrible at this retirement thing." "We're not retired," Clara protested. "We're just stepping back." "Really?" "Because I saw you reorganizing the entire root cellar yesterday, and Father was out mending fence at 5 in the morning." Sarah looked at her siblings for support. "Am I wrong?" "She's not wrong," James admitted. Pa, I told you I'd handle that fence. You don't trust me to do it right? Ethan looked stricken. Of course I trust you. I just thought, you thought you could do it better, Michael finished with a knowing smile. It's all right, Pa. We get it. This ranch is your life's work. But we need you to let us make it ours now, too. Emma leaned forward, her eyes bright. And besides, don't you want to actually enjoy yourselves? Lucy and I were talking, and we think you and Mother should take a real trip, not just to Denver or Boulder, but somewhere you've always wanted to go. Where would we even go? Clara asked, though she felt a flutter of excitement at the thought. What about back east? Lucy suggested quietly. You've talked about Pennsylvania sometimes, Mother, about places you remember from when you were young. Don't you want to see them again? Clara glanced at Ethan, who was watching her with interest. I haven't been back since I left. I'm not even sure what's still there. Then let's find out, Ethan said. We could take the train, make a real journey of it. Visit the places you remember, see how they've changed. The children seized on the idea with enthusiasm, making plans and arrangements before Clara and Ethan could fully process what was happening. Within 2 weeks, tickets were purchased, bags were packed, and Clara found herself standing on the platform at the Ridgeway station, about to board a train heading east for the first time in nearly 3 decades. You'll write? She asked James for the 3rd time, gripping his hands. Every week, Ma, I promise. James smiled down at his mother, so tall now, so capable. We'll be fine. The ranch will be fine. Just go and have a good time. Sarah hugged Clara tightly. Stop worrying. We're adults now, remember? We can handle this. The journey east was unlike anything Clara had experienced. The train was comfortable, the scenery constantly changing, and having Ethan's undivided attention for days on end was a luxury she'd forgotten existed. They talked for hours, played cards, read to each other, and watched the landscape transform from the dramatic peaks and valleys of Colorado to the gentler, greener hills of the east. When they finally arrived in Pennsylvania, Clara felt a strange disconnection. The station was the same, but everything else seemed both familiar and foreign. The streets she remembered were still there, but they'd been paved. The buildings had been renovated or replaced. Even the air smelled different, or perhaps she'd simply grown too accustomed to the clean, dry air of Colorado. They stayed at a modest hotel and spent their days walking through Clara's past. She showed Ethan the factory where her father had worked, now closed and crumbling. The church where her parents had married, still standing proud and white. The small house where she'd grown up, now occupied by a young family with children playing in the yard. It's smaller than I remember, Clara said softly, standing across the street and watching the children laugh and chase each other. Everything is smaller. Ethan put his arm around her shoulders. That's because you've grown. You're not that frightened girl anymore. They visited her parents' graves, and Clara knelt between the 2 headstones, touching the weathered marble. She told them about her life, about Ethan and the children and the ranch. She told them she was happy, that she'd built something beautiful from the ashes of her loss. And when she stood, tears streaming down her face, Ethan was there to hold her. I wish they could have met you, Clara said against his chest. I wish they could have known the man I married, seen the life we built. I wish I could have met them too, Ethan replied. They raised an extraordinary woman. They must have been remarkable people. But the most significant moment came when Clara stood outside her Uncle Gerald's house. It was a grand place, far nicer than her childhood home had been, with manicured gardens and expensive curtains in the windows. Clara stared at it for a long time, remembering the fear that had driven her from this place, the desperation that had led her to answer Ethan's advertisement. Do you want to knock? Ethan asked quietly. No. Clara's voice was firm. I don't need anything from him. I don't need his apology or his acknowledgement. I just needed to stand here and realize that he doesn't have any power over me anymore. He never really did. I gave it to him by being afraid, but I'm not afraid now. She turned away from the house, taking Ethan's hand. Let's go. There's nothing for me here. They spent another week in the East, visiting museums and theaters and restaurants that Colorado didn't offer. Clara bought books she couldn't find back home, fabrics she thought the twins would like, small gifts for each of the children. But with each passing day, she felt the pull of home growing stronger. I thought I'd feel more nostalgic, she told Ethan one evening as they sat in their hotel room. I thought coming back here would make me long for what I'd left behind, but all I feel is grateful that I left. This isn't my home anymore. It hasn't been for a very long time. Where's your home? Ethan asked, though his smile suggested he already knew the answer. Wherever you are, Clara said simply. Colorado, with our children and our ranch and our life. That's home. That's where I belong. The journey back west felt faster somehow, as if the train understood their eagerness to return. When they finally pulled into the Ridgeway station, the entire family was there to meet them, all 5 children, plus Michael's new wife Rebecca and Sarah's beau Thomas. The homecoming was joyful and chaotic, everyone talking at once, trying to share all the news from the weeks Clara and Ethan had been gone. The ranch had thrived in their absence. James had successfully negotiated a better price for their cattle. Sarah had won her first legal case. The twins had expanded the garden and were selling produce in town. See, James said as they all climbed into wagons for the ride home. We told you we could handle it. You did more than handle it, Ethan said with obvious pride. You excelled. That night, after all the excitement had settled and the family had dispersed to their own homes, Clara and Ethan stood on their porch looking out over the ranch. The moon was bright, casting silver light across the familiar landscape. It's good to be home, Clara said, leaning against Ethan's solid warmth. It is, he agreed, but the trip was good too. We should do more of that. More living, less working. Agreed. Clara turned in his arms to face him. I learned something on this trip, Ethan. I learned that the past doesn't have any hold on me anymore. I'm not that desperate girl who stepped off the stagecoach with nothing. I'm Clara Cole, and I have everything that matters. And what's that? Ethan asked, though his eyes were tender with understanding. You, our children. This life we built together. That's everything. They settled into a new rhythm over the following months, one that balanced involvement with the ranch and genuine leisure. They took afternoon rides to the high meadow just to enjoy the view. They spent mornings reading together in the parlor. They visited neighbors not because cooperative business demanded it, but because they genuinely enjoyed the company. The children continued to thrive. James married a sweet-natured girl from town named Catherine, and they moved into the foreman's house that Ethan and Clara had built the previous year. Sarah passed the bar examination, becoming one of the first female lawyers in Colorado, and married Thomas in a ceremony that had half the county in attendance. Michael and Rebecca announced they were expecting their first child, making Clara and Ethan grandparents-to-be. The twins were the last to find their paths. Emma discovered a talent for photography and opened a studio in town, while Lucy's artistic abilities led her to design work, creating beautiful quilts and clothing that were in high demand. As Clara watched her children build their own lives and families, she felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with accomplishment and everything to do with love. They were good people, kind and hardworking and fair. They treated their spouses with respect and affection. They were building partnerships like the one she and Ethan had modeled for them. We did well, she told Ethan one evening as they prepared for bed. We did, he agreed, climbing under the covers beside her. At 52, his hair was more gray than dark, and lines bracketed his mouth and eyes. But to Clara, he was as handsome as the day they'd met. Perhaps more so, because now every line and silver hair represented years they'd spent together. Do you ever regret it? Clara asked, a question that had been forming in her mind. Sending for a mail-order bride instead of courting someone properly? You could have found someone with more to offer. Ethan turned to her, his expression serious. Clara Cole, in all our years together, that might be the most ridiculous thing you've ever said. But no. He cupped her face in his hands. Listen to me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You've been my partner, my lover, my best friend. You've given me 5 incredible children and helped me build something that will last for generations. You've challenged me, supported me, and loved me even when I didn't deserve it. How could I possibly regret the best decision I ever made? Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. I love you so much. After all these years, I love you more than I did in the beginning. That's how it's supposed to work, Ethan said softly, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. Love that lasts doesn't stay the same. It grows deeper, stronger, more resilient. What we have now, This is what I dreamed of when I wrote that advertisement. This partnership, this depth of feeling, this life we've built together. They made love that night with the tenderness and passion of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies and hearts so completely that words were often unnecessary. Afterward, Clara lay in Ethan's arms, listening to his heartbeat slow, and felt the same sense of rightness she'd felt on their wedding night all those years ago. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. The ranch prospered under James's management, incorporating new techniques while honoring the traditions Ethan had established. The cooperative grew stronger, with Sarah providing legal guidance that protected the small ranchers from exploitation. The family expanded as grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with young voices and laughter once again. Claire discovered that being a grandmother was perhaps even more joyful than being a mother. She could spoil the little ones and then send them home to their parents. She could share wisdom gained from experience without the weight of full responsibility. And watching Ethan with their grandchildren, seeing his patience and gentleness with the next generation, made her fall in love with him all over again. One autumn afternoon, Clara sat on the porch with her first grandchild, James and Catherine's son Matthew, reading him a story. The boy was 4, bright and curious, with his grandfather's blue eyes and his grandmother's dark hair. "Grandma," Matthew asked, interrupting the story, "how did you and Grandpa fall in love?" Clara smiled, thinking about how to explain it to a 4-year-old. "Well, your grandpa saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and he was patient and kind while I learned to see it too." "But how did you know you loved him?" "I knew because being with him made me feel safe and happy. Because I wanted to share everything with him, the good things and the hard things. Because I couldn't imagine my life without him in it." Matthew considered this seriously. "I love cookies. Is that the same?" Clara laughed, hugging the boy close. "Not quite the same, sweetheart, but both kinds of love are important." Ethan joined them on the porch, settling into the chair beside Clara with a groan that spoke of a long day's work. He was 58 now, and while still strong, the years were beginning to show in the careful way he moved. "You're supposed to be taking it easy," Clara reminded him. "I was just checking on the new foal. James has everything well in hand." Ethan reached over to ruffle Matthew's hair. "What are you two talking about?" "Grandma was telling me about love," Matthew announced. "Not cookie love, the other kind." Ethan's eyes met Clara's, full of warmth and amusement. "Did she tell you she's the smartest woman I've ever known? Or that her laugh is my favorite sound in the world? Or that every day with her is better than the day before?" Matthew giggled. "You're silly, Grandpa." "I'm honest," Ethan corrected. "There's a difference." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Catherine came to collect Matthew for supper. Clara and Ethan remained on the porch, hands clasped between their chairs, watching the light fade from the day. "Do you remember our first evening here?" Clara asked softly. "When you made me supper and we sat at that table like strangers trying to figure each other out?" "I remember being terrified you'd ask to leave," Ethan admitted. "You looked so scared, so ready to bolt at any moment." "I was scared. I'd never known kindness like yours. It seemed too good to be true. And now?" Clara squeezed his hand. "Now I know it is true. Now I know that the best things in life are built slowly, with patience and care and love. You taught me that, Ethan. You taught me that I was worth loving, worth respecting, worth building a life with." "You taught me things too," Ethan said. "You taught me that strength comes in many forms, that intelligence and compassion are just as valuable as physical ability, that a true partner makes you better than you could ever be alone." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and stars began to emerge in the vast Colorado sky. Lights appeared in windows across the ranch, in James and Catherine's house, in the bunkhouse where Tom still worked after all these years, in the barn where night watch was being kept over new calves. "We built something good here," Clara said, not for the first time but with no less wonder. "We did," Ethan agreed, "and it's going to continue long after we're gone. Our children will carry it forward, and their children after them. The legacy isn't just the land or the cattle. It's the way we loved each other, the way we treated people fairly, the way we built something together instead of alone." Clara stood, tugging on Ethan's hand. "Come on, let's go to bed." It's barely dark, Ethan protested, though he rose willingly. I know, but we've earned the right to go to bed early if we want to. We've earned the right to spend our evenings however we choose. Clara smiled up at him. And I choose to spend mine with you, in the bed we've shared for 30 years, in the house we built together, on the land we've made our own. Ethan pulled her close, kissing her forehead in that gentle way that still made her heart flutter. Best choice you ever made, coming to Colorado. Second best, Clara corrected. The best choice was saying yes when you asked to court me. Everything good in my life came from that one decision. They walked into the house together, turning off lamps and checking locks, with the practiced ease of long habit. Upstairs, they prepared for bed in the comfortable silence of people who'd shared this routine thousands of times. But when they finally settled under the quilts, one of Lucy's creations, beautiful and warm, Ethan pulled Clara close and she went willingly, tucking herself against his side in the position they'd slept in for 3 decades. I love you, Clara Cole, Ethan whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Ethan Cole, Clara whispered back. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that. And as they drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the life they'd built and the love they'd nurtured, both of them knew with absolute certainty that they had found what so many people spent their whole lives searching for, a true partnership, a deep and abiding love, and a legacy that would endure long after their time had passed. The winter that Clara turned 63 came hard and early, with snow falling in October and temperatures dropping to levels that made even the old-timers shake their heads. Claire stood at the kitchen window, watching the flakes swirl and dance, and felt a deep weariness settle into her bones that had nothing to do with the cold. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. At 70, he moved more slowly than he once had, his joints stiff on cold mornings, but his embrace was still strong and sure. Thinking about something? He asked, resting his chin on top of her head. About how fast it all went, Clara said softly. It feels like yesterday I was stepping off that stagecoach, terrified and alone. And now here we are, grandparents to 12, with great-grandchildren on the way. Where did all those years go? Into living, Ethan said simply. Into building this. He gestured to the window, where through the snow they could see lights in several houses dotting their land. James and Catherine's house, expanded now to accommodate their 4 children. Michael and Rebecca's cottage near the veterinary barn. Emma's studio, converted from one of the old outbuildings. We didn't waste a single day, Clara. We lived every one of them fully. Clara turned in his arms, looking up at his weathered face. His hair was completely white now, his blue eyes surrounded by deep lines. But when he smiled at her, she still saw the man who'd promised her partnership instead of servitude, who'd courted her when they were already married, who'd loved her with unwavering devotion for 45 years. I'm tired, Ethan, she admitted, more tired than I used to be. I know, me too. He kissed her forehead gently. That's why we built what we built, so we could rest when we needed to, so our children could carry on what we started. That winter was harder than most, and not just because of the weather. Clara caught a cold in December that settled deep in her chest and refused to leave. Michael insisted on checking on her daily, his medical knowledge. He'd studied human medicine as well as veterinary, making him worry more than she thought necessary. Mother, you need to rest more, he scolded gently after listening to her chest. No more insisting on cooking Sunday dinners for 20 people. No more staying up late to finish quilting projects. Your body needs time to heal. I've been resting, Clara protested, though even she could hear the wheeze in her breathing. You've been pretending to rest while actually directing everyone else's activities, Sarah corrected, entering the room with a tray of tea and honey. We've all noticed. You sit in your chair and tell us exactly how to do everything we're already perfectly capable of doing. Clara wanted to argue, but a coughing fit interrupted her. When it finally subsided, she slumped back against the pillows, exhausted. Ethan took her hand, his expression worried. Listen to them, Clara. Please. I need you to get better. The fear in his voice made Clara's chest tighten for reasons that had nothing to do with her illness. In all their years together, Ethan had been her rock, steady and unshakable. Hearing that tremor in his voice reminded her that he needed her just as much as she needed him. All right, she whispered. I'll rest. Really rest this time. The children took over completely, running the household with efficient care. Catherine brought meals, Rebecca managed the medicinal teas and poultices. Sarah handled any business that needed Clara's attention. The twins took turns sitting with her, reading aloud or simply keeping her company. Ethan barely left her side. He slept in the chair beside their bed, holding her hand through the night. He helped her to the bathroom, supported her when she wanted to sit by the window, brought her water, and adjusted her pillows. His devotion was absolute, as it had always been. "You should sleep in the bed," Clara told him one night, watching him shift uncomfortably in the chair. "You'll hurt your back." "I'm fine here," Ethan insisted. "I want to be close in case you need me." "I always need you," Clara said softly. "I've needed you every day since I met you." Ethan moved to the bed, carefully settling beside her on top of the covers. He pulled her close, and Clara rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Do you remember our first night in this house?" Ethan asked quietly. "When I gave you your own room, and you couldn't understand why. I remember thinking you were either the kindest man I'd ever met, or the most elaborate liar." Clara smiled against his chest. "I was so scared to believe in your kindness. And now? Now I know it was real. All of it was real. Everything you promised me that day came true, Ethan. The partnership, the respect, the love, all of it." They lay together in the darkness, listening to the wind howl outside and the crackle of the fire in the hearth. Clara felt herself drifting, warm and safe in Ethan's arms, thinking about all the nights they'd spent exactly like this over the past 4.5 decades. Slowly, over the weeks that followed, Clara's strength began to return. The cough loosened its grip on her chest. Her appetite came back. Color returned to her cheeks. By the time spring arrived, melting the snow and coaxing green shoots from the earth, Clara was herself again, perhaps a bit more fragile, a bit more easily tired, but fundamentally recovered. "You scared me," Ethan admitted one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. "I wasn't ready to lose you." "I'm not going anywhere yet," Clara assured him, squeezing his hand. "We still have too much living to do." And they did continue living, though at a gentler pace. They took short walks around the property, visiting with family and watching the grandchildren grow. They spent afternoons in their favorite spot in the meadow when weather permitted, reading or simply sitting together in comfortable silence. They hosted Sunday dinners but let the children do most of the work, Clara directing from her chair with a smile. The years continued to pass, marked by weddings and births, by seasons changing and grandchildren growing into young adults. The ranch expanded further under James's capable management, incorporating new methods while preserving the values Ethan and Clara had established. The cooperative thrived, with Sarah's legal work protecting the interests of small ranchers throughout the region. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration that lasted 3 days. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and tears, stories told and retold about the early days when Ethan and Clara had built something from nothing. "Tell us again how you met," one of the great-grandchildren begged, a girl of 8 named Grace, who was fascinated by family history. Clara and Ethan exchanged glances, and Ethan gestured for Clara to tell it. She'd become the family storyteller, her gift for words never fading even as her body grew more frail. "Well," Clara began, settling Grace on her lap, "50 years ago, I was a very different person. I was alone and frightened, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Your great-grandfather had placed an advertisement in a newspaper, looking for a wife to share his life with." "That's so romantic," Grace sighed. "Actually, I was terrified," Clara admitted with a laugh. "I expected to be a servant, someone to cook and clean and ask for nothing, but your great-grandfather surprised me. From the very first day, he treated me like a partner. He gave me choices when I'd never had choices before. He valued my opinions when no one had ever cared what I thought. And slowly, very slowly, he taught me that I was worth loving." She looked at Ethan, who was watching her with eyes that still held all the love and devotion they'd held 50 years ago. "He courted me even though we were already married. He waited until I was ready to truly be his wife. He built this entire life with me, brick by brick, day by day, treating me as an equal every single step of the way." "And you loved him right away?" Grace asked. "No," Clara said honestly. "I was too scared to love anyone right away. But your great-grandfather was patient. He showed me every day that I could trust him, that his kindness was real, And eventually, I couldn't help but love him. How could I not love someone who saw the best in me, even when I couldn't see it in myself? Ethan reached over and took Clara's hand, his voice rough with emotion when he spoke. The luckiest day of my life was when you stepped off that stagecoach. I asked for a wife, and I got a partner who made me better in every possible way. I got someone who challenged me and supported me and loved me even when I didn't deserve it. I got the love of my life. There wasn't a dry eye in the room, and several of the grandchildren had to wipe away tears. James stood, raising his glass. To our parents, he said, his voice thick with emotion, who showed us all what love looks like, what partnership looks like, what building a life together really means. Everything good we have, everything we are, comes from the foundation you built. Thank you for loving each other so well, and for teaching us to do the same. The toast was echoed around the room, glasses raised high. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks as she looked around at the faces of her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, all of them here because she'd had the courage to answer an advertisement, and Ethan had had the wisdom to offer partnership instead of servitude. As the celebration continued into the night, Clara and Ethan slipped away to the porch, needing a moment of quiet together. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars they'd watched together for 50 years. I never imagined this, Clara said softly. When I was young, I never let myself imagine being this happy, having this much love in my life. Neither did I, Ethan admitted. I thought I might get a competent helpmate if I was lucky. Instead, I got everything I never knew I needed. They sat in silence for a while, hands clasped, hearts full. Finally, Clara spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan, I need you to promise me something. Anything. When my time comes, and it will come, sooner or later, I need you to promise me you'll be all right, that you'll let the children take care of you, that you won't give up on living just because I'm gone. Ethan's hand tightened on hers. Don't talk like that. We have to talk about it sometime, Clara said gently. We're not young anymore, my love, and I need to know that you'll be all right. How could I be all right without you? Ethan's voice broke. You're the best part of me, Clara. You have been from the beginning. And you'll still have me, Clara insisted, in our children, who have your strength and my stubbornness. In this ranch we built together, in every sunset we watched, and every decision we made as partners. You'll have me in all of that, even when I'm gone. I can't imagine it, Ethan whispered. I can't imagine waking up without you beside me, eating meals alone, going through days without hearing your voice or seeing your smile. Then don't imagine it. Not yet. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. We still have time. Maybe years yet. Let's not waste them worrying about the end when we can enjoy the now. The years that followed proved Clara right. They did have more time, though both of them felt the weight of mortality more acutely as their 70s became their 80s. They moved more slowly, tired more easily, but the love between them never dimmed. Clara's mind remained sharp, and she spent hours recording family stories and memories in journals she planned to leave for the grandchildren. Ethan still made the rounds of the ranch each day, though now he rode in a wagon instead of on horseback, checking on operations and offering advice when asked. They celebrated their 60th anniversary with a quieter gathering, just immediate family. Clara was 83 now, Ethan 90, and while both were still strong in spirit, their bodies were failing in small but undeniable ways. 60 years, Clara marveled, sitting beside Ethan on the sofa while their family mingled around them. That's longer than some people live entire lives. Best 60 years of my life, Ethan said, lifting her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. Every single day with you has been a gift. That night, as they prepared for bed with the slow, careful movements of the very old, Clara felt a peace settle over her that had nothing to do with exhaustion and everything to do with satisfaction. She had lived a full life. She had loved and been loved. She had built something that would endure long after she was gone. Thank you, she said to Ethan as he helped her into bed. For what? For seeing me when I felt invisible, for valuing me when I thought I was worthless, for loving me when I didn't know how to love myself. Clara cupped his weathered face in her hands. For giving me a life beyond anything I ever dared to dream of. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely rancher who didn't know what he was asking for when he placed that advertisement, Ethan replied. Thank you for being brave enough to trust me, for building this life with me, for loving me for 60 years. They kissed, soft and gentle, a kiss that held 60 years of passion and partnership and profound affection. Then they settled into bed, Clara tucked against Ethan's side in the position they'd slept in for 6 decades, listening to each other breathe. The seasons turned once more. Spring gave way to summer, summer to fall. Clara felt herself growing weaker, though she tried to hide it from Ethan. But he knew, of course he knew. He'd known her for 60 years. There was nothing she could hide from him. One autumn afternoon, Clara asked Ethan to take her to the high meadow one last time. The wildflowers were past their peak, but the aspens were turning gold, creating a carpet of color beneath a brilliant blue sky. They sat on their favorite rock, the place where Ethan had first asked to court her all those years ago. Clara leaned against his shoulder, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and the steady presence of the man she loved beside her. "This is where it really began," she said softly. "This is where I admitted I wanted more than just survival, where I let myself hope for love." "Best conversation we ever had," Ethan said, his arm tightening around her. "Changed everything." It did. Clara was quiet for a moment, watching a hawk circle overhead. "Ethan, I'm tired, really tired, and I think my time is coming soon." "Don't say that," Ethan pleaded, but his voice lacked conviction. He could feel it too, the way she was fading like autumn flowers before winter. "I'm not afraid," Clara assured him. "How could I be afraid when I've had such a beautiful life? When I've been loved so completely? I'm ready, my love. I'm ready to rest." "I'm not ready," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "I'll never be ready to lose you." Clara turned to look at him, memorizing every line of his beloved face. "You're not losing me. You're just releasing me to the next part of the journey. But everything we built together, everything we shared, that's eternal. That lives on in our children and grandchildren, in this land we tended, in the love we gave each other." They sat there for hours, holding each other, talking about memories both old and recent. They remembered that first nervous dinner, that first real kiss, the births of their children, the growth of the ranch, the 1,000 small moments that had woven together to create a life. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Clara spoke one last time. "Promise me you'll remember this. Not the ending, but all of it. The partnership, the love, the life we built together. Promise me you'll tell the great-grandchildren about how we started with nothing but trust and built an empire of love." "I promise," Ethan whispered, holding her close. Clara passed peacefully in her sleep 2 weeks later, in the bed she'd shared with Ethan for 60 years, with her husband's hand in hers and their children gathered around. She was 84 years old, and she left behind a legacy of love that would ripple through generations. Ethan was devastated, but not destroyed. He had Clara's example to follow, her strength, her resilience, her belief that life was meant to be lived fully, even in the face of loss. He continued to be present for his family, to offer wisdom and support, to tell stories about the woman who had transformed his life with her courage and love. He lived for 3 more years, years filled with family and memory and quiet satisfaction. On the morning of what would have been his and Clara's 63rd anniversary, Ethan passed away in his sleep, in the same bed where Clara had died, his hand reaching across the empty space where she'd once lain. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the shadow of the mountains they'd both loved. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and a single inscription that James had chosen: "Partners in all things, together forever." The ranch continued to thrive under James's stewardship and eventually his children's after him. The house remained the center of family gatherings, filled with the laughter and love of new generations. Sarah's legal work evolved into a firm that represented ranchers throughout Colorado. Michael's veterinary practice passed to his son. The twins' artistic legacies lived on in beautiful quilts and photographs that adorned homes throughout the region. But more than the material legacy, Ethan and Clara left behind something far more valuable: the example of what love could be when built on respect, partnership, and unwavering devotion. Their story was told and retold through the generations, a reminder that the greatest things in life often come from the smallest acts of courage and the simplest decisions to treat each other with kindness and dignity. Years later, when young couples in the family faced challenges in their marriages, they would remember Ethan and Clara. When someone felt undervalued or invisible, they would remember how Clara had blossomed under Ethan's patient devotion. When someone doubted that true partnership was possible, they would look at the ranch that still bore the Cole name and remember the two people who had built it together from nothing. The high meadow where Ethan had courted Clara became a family landmark, a place where proposals happened and anniversaries were celebrated. The house they'd built was carefully preserved, each generation adding to it, but never forgetting the two rooms where it all began: Ethan's room at the end of the hall and Clara's smaller room with the window overlooking the valley. And on quiet evenings, when the grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered on the porch to watch the sunset, someone would always tell the story of the frightened young woman who stepped off a stagecoach expecting servitude and the lonely rancher who offered her partnership instead. They would tell of how that one choice, to see each other as equals, to build together instead of alone, to choose love over convenience, had created a legacy that would endure long after both were gone. Because that was the true miracle of Ethan and Clara's story. Not that they had found each other, though that was remarkable enough. Not that they had built a successful ranch, though that was impressive. The miracle was that they had shown everyone who came after them what was possible when two people truly committed to loving each other well. They had proven that love built on respect and partnership could weather any storm, that kindness and patience could transform fear into trust, that two people working together could accomplish far more than either could alone, that a life built on mutual support and genuine affection could become a legacy that enriched generations. And so the story lived on, passed down through the family like a treasured heirloom, a reminder that the best love stories aren't about grand gestures or dramatic passions. They're about daily choices to honor and value each other, about seeing your partner's potential and helping them reach it, about building something together that's greater than the sum of its parts. Clara Whitmore Cole and Ethan Cole had lived that story, had embodied that love, and in doing so had created something truly eternal. Not just a family or a ranch or a legacy of material success, but an example of what human love could be at its very best. And that example, carried forward through generations, was the greatest gift they could have given to those who came after them.